Well, why don't we get started? I'm Fred Murphy. I'm with the Marxist Education Project. Very happy to welcome everyone here for LA is Burning with Dennis Broe. Uh, Things have been happening so rapidly and so crazily here in the past 2 or 3 weeks in the U.S. that the devastating fires in Los Angeles have kind of taken the back seat in the news. Certainly, the aftermath of those fires is still really horrible and catastrophic for the people who were affected, but it has left the front pages. But it's back on our front page today with our good friend Dennis, who's spoken at a number of MEP events in the past. He's a journalist, critic, and a scholar. He has taught at the Sorbonne and Long Island University. He's the author of a number of books on film noir, media, and television, as well as 5 novels about the coming of McCarthyism to Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s, including Left of Eden, which I'm currently enjoying, and the latest in the series, The Dark Ages. Dennis is going to speak for about 30 or 40 minutes, and following his talk, we'll just open the floor for conversation, questions and comments, and audience participation, if you will. So, Dennis, I'll just turn it over to you. And
Okay,
Dennis is speaking to us from Paris today.
yes, just to check, we are recording. We are recording, right, Fred?
Yes, it's on. It's rolling.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So the topic today is LA burning. I want to just introduce by saying, contemporary politicians are blaming the destruction and loss of life in the LA wildfires on each other. But the truth is the fires are the result of not even years or decades, but actually centuries of neglect. To examine this topology sheds light on the ingrained power, the structural class and racial imbalances, and the wanton devastation of a city organized not for its people, but for its elites. I'm going to be using Mike Davis's Ecology of Fear as a blueprint. We're going to look at the 5 areas the still smoldering fires encompass. One is the geographical and geological longue durée of the land of fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, and mudslides. 2 is the ecological and the relation of the fires to ever more intense global warming. 3 is the neoliberal moment of the deterioration of the welfare state in its domestic and foreign ramifications and the increase in the various forms of the repressive state. 4 is the sedimented class and racial inequalities, which we'll look at seen in the African American community of Altadena. And 5 is the altered character of Los Angeles and especially Hollywood as no longer simply imaginary but now actual but also empty site of disaster. Okay, so yes, Fred explained who I am, Paris correspondent for Perry Miller's Arts Express. I have a radio show in Paris called Breaking Glass. I write for the British Daily Morning Star, British crimes website Crime Time, and in the U.S. for People's World, LA Progressive, and Monthly Review Online. And as he said, I'm the author of 5 novels, including the latest, which is let's see, okay, trying to move this now. Okay, The Dark Ages, which is about the coming of HUAC to Hollywood in 1951, which is when they did a lot more damage than even in first round. Okay, the geographical and geological longue durée. Okay, we're using Mike Davis, but also Fernand Braudèl's magnificent Mediterranean, the Age of Philip II, because in any kind of materialist grasping of the region, we must start with its topography. And so we shall. Davis's book was written in 1998, so we're looking 27 years later. But it does owe much to Braudèl's masterful study of the Mediterranean, including a comparison to Mediterranean topography, which is a combination of mountains and seas, highlands and lowlands. And also in terms of Mediterranean topography, think of the recent heat wave and fires in Greece last summer with tourists needing to be evacuated, just like the evacuations in LA. Also, an interesting point to make is that when Braudèl's writing, he's talking about this quite a distinction between the peoples in the mountains, the peoples in the seas, and that is a distinction that's continually breaking down in Los Angeles, which is very sort of interesting. And there's Braudèl's book, and there's Mike Davis's Ecology of Fear. Okay, the damage. At least 29 deaths, similar number of injuries, destruction of more than 16,000 structures, buildings, damage or destruction of over 50,000 acres and thousands of evacuations. Um, yeah. Uh, the first fire was in the Pacific Palisades, then others broke out in Altadena, Eaton, Sylmar, Hollywood Hills, and the West Hills. Um, okay, so what seemed different, someone said about these fires, is how unusually fierce the Santa Ana winds were, combined with a drought that turned dozens of square miles into tinder, threatened to blow embers from the hills and canyons into urban flatlands, not usually considered vulnerable to wildfires. A designer said, or an architect said, I've designed three buildings on Hollywood Boulevard, and never was the risk of wildfires raised as an issue, but now it is. Wildfires on Hollywood Boulevard and south of Sunset Boulevard. Um, so this one spokesman said the Eaton fire has taught us that we must remain vigilant and prepare for the unimaginable. Well, that statement is ridiculous. There's no, it's not unimaginable at all. In fact, if you study the history of Los Angeles, it's all utterly imaginable. So that's a kind of politician statement trying to make it seem like, this event, there was no preparation for this event. Nobody knew it was going to happen, when that's totally not true. Um, LA, just to start out, is a land of earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires, and mudslides, droughts, and high winds. And I don't know if you remember or not, but as soon as the fires were over, since so much land had been cleared, there was an immediate fear of mudslides, and as well as tornadoes. LA is supposed to not be a land of tornadoes. That's supposed to be in the Midwest, in Kansas with Dorothy. But actually, L. Frank Baum was Oz's creator, and he lived just over the hill from Pasadena in Hollywood. And Dorothy and Toto were actually, they were in Kansas, but in fact, this land where the Wizard of Oz was created was actually a land of tornadoes, like the one like this one whisking Dorothy away. Uh, let's see. Southern California has always been sold as a land of milk and honey. One Los Angeles Times article in 1934 said there's no place on earth that offers greater security to life and greater freedom from natural disasters than Southern California. And of course, that's always been the question, that is Los Angeles is Los Angeles a land of milk and honey, a paradise, or is it a land of devastation and destruction? Uh, you know, um, and Southern California has developed a style of urbanization that not only amplifies natural disasters, but reactivates dormant hazards and creates hazards where none have existed. And these things are not are market driven. For generations, market driven urbanization has transgressed environmental common sense. Historic wildfire corridors have been turned into view lot suburbs. Southern California has reaped flood, fire, and earthquake tragedies that were as avoidable as unnatural. This, and what Mike Davis calls the social construction of natural disaster, is largely hidden from view by a way of thinking that simultaneously imposes false expectations on the environment, that it's supposed to be mild, that nothing is ever supposed to happen. Southern California is the land of sunshine, and then explains the inevitable disappointments as proof of a malign and hostile nature. As a day survivor of the Northridge earthquake, said, I feel like nature let us down. When in fact it wasn't nature, it was the power structure in Los Angeles that's been letting people down. Some examples of these things, as I've said, the 1994 earthquake in Northridge, the costliest natural disaster in American history. The Pasadena Devil's Gate Dam, built to last centuries, which filled up with debris in less than 50 years. Generations of fruit trees were bulldozed to make way for track houses in San Fernando and San Gabriel valleys. And the idea of the Los Angeles River, for most it's a joke. but it was once a thriving river that was completely undone, was sacrificed for the sake of emergency work relief, the preservation of industrial land values, and temporary abatement of a flood problem. Um, Okay, more than 60,000 house sites were carved out of the mountains and foothills during the 50s and early 60s, and this had consequences. By 1970, more than one-third of the surface area of the Los Angeles region was dedicated to the car. Freeways, streets, parking lots, and driveways. What generations of tourists and migrants had once admired as a real-life Garden of Eden was now buried under an estimated 3 billion tons of concrete. Sponsored originally this whole car mentality by the Chandlers and the LA Times, which owned many of the businesses this construction needed and profited from it. Uh, okay. And as Mike Davis says, county government in Southern California is hopelessly captive to the land development industry. Most natural disasters are characteristic rather than accidental features of the places and societies that they occupy. That's his other sort of major point here, that these things are not unimaginable. In fact, they are quite imaginable. And one of the very interesting things about fire is that nature's way of fire prevention was to periodically burn away the decaying vegetation, sagebrush, chaparral, and live oak. 2 centuries ago, canyon wildfires were common and happened quite often, and that's how nature took care of particularly the chaparral, this like decaying wood that is that when tinder when it catches fire with tinder, it just goes up as if it were an oil station or something. Um, let's see. Okay. So, most experts agree the most effective way to curb the rising fire danger is regular prescriptive burning every 5 to 7 years to reduce fuel accumulation. However, this has proved almost impossible to implement in Southern California outside of unpopulated national forest jurisdictions because hillside homeowners associations vehemently oppose prescriptive burning because of the belief that blackened hillsides and ash in the swimming pools reduce property values. So you have to say, look what happened at not doing, the easy natural solution to this to get rid of the chaparral. So the possibility for an intense, fast-running fire increases dramatically as the fuels exceed 20 years of age. Indeed, half-century-old chaparral, heavily laden with dead mass, is calculated to burn with 50 times more intensity than 20-year-old chaparral. And that's what was burning in the Pacific Palisades. That's why it lit. That's why a single spark lit and it caught fire and did so much, or part of the reason why it did so much damage. This old timber has never been burnt off, which is what should have been done. Let's see. And okay, an acre of old chaparral is the fuel equivalent of about 75 barrels of crude oil. To give you an idea. It reached a point with the fires now where, add a spark to the dense, dry vegetation on such an occasion, and the hillsides will explode in an uncontrollable wildfire. The speed and heat of the fire is so intense that firefighters can only attempt to prevent lateral spread of the fire while waiting for the winds to abate or the fuel to diminish. That is, the firefighters themselves can't really put the fire out, and that's what happened. It was so long before they could get it under control. I don't know if you check those things or not, but every day the Times would publish, what percentage they had under control, and after a week of hard firefighting, that would be like 3%, It just made it very, very difficult. Plus, what Mike Davis says, a monomaniacal obsession with managing ignition rather than chaparral accumulation simply makes doomsday-like firestorms and the great floods that follow them virtually inevitable. Nothing about fire prevention, only about dealing with the crisis once it arises. So forgetting or unwilling to deal with the topographical history. And it had happened before. 1930 Decker Canyon fire was a worst-case scenario involving 50-year-old chaparral and a fierce Santa Ana wind. The fire was raging close to the Malibu district, and people had thought the whole city might go up. ultimately this apocalypse, which Nathaniel West probably based Day of the Locust on, um, was avoided. And no thanks to human initiative when the fickle Santa Ana abruptly subsided. And that did not happen in January when the winds grew ever more intense, this year. Uh, Fire itself accelerates gentrification and the replacement of bohemian lifestyles by snobbery and exclusiveness. That is what's going to happen now. This question of what will happen afterwards. Malibu, meanwhile, let's see if yeah, there's Malibu. That's the idyllic Malibu from on the cutaway scene from Two and a Half Men. I think everybody's ever seen the show knows this, but Malibu is the wildfire capital of North America and possibly the world. Fire here has a relentless staccato rhythm syncopated by landslides and floods. The rugged 22-mile-long coastline is scourged on the average by a large fire, 1,000 acres more, every 2.5 years, and the entire surface area of the western Santa Monica Mountains have been burnt 3 times over this century. So it's particularly flammable. Southern California's remnant natural landscape continues to be destroyed or privatized also. Um, and there's a real movement into the hills and in colonizing more and more of the hills. The impetus for this movement, though, is at one point it was the love of the great outdoors or frontier rusticity. But that's not what it is now. Now what people crave are thickets of privacy outside the dense fabric of common citizenship and urban life. Hillside home building, moreover, has despoiled the natural heritage of the majority for the sake of the affluent few, which is also the case of Malibu, actually. LA itself is a city bounded by a desert on one side and on the other by an ocean. And we're going to talk about water later. But the one question is, why not use the ocean water, the salt water, to put out the fires? Well, the answer is that you can't, because salt water destroys the landscape, and it also is harmful to firefighting equipment. So then the next question is, since you're sitting next to an ocean, why not have desalination plants so that the water's available? Because that was one of the things, they were running out of water and just not enough have been built. So they did end up dumping some salt water on the fire, and that will really ruin what's below. Okay. Yes, as I said, they're from the 1850s to the 1870s. There are great debates about whether California as a whole was Eden or worthless desolation. Ultimately, the railroad publicists and the Chamber of Commerce promoters repackaged Los Angeles as our Mediterranean, our Italy, which is, as I said, also now burning up, in terms of Greece last summer. A faux landscape celebrating a fictional history from which original Indian and Mexican ancestors have been expunged. And we'll talk about a little bit later about that, about the racial things. Nothing so distinguishes Southern California from classical Anglo-American environments as the contrasting roles extreme events play in each. In Mediterranean desert regions, high-intensity, low-frequency events or disasters are the ordinary agents of landscape and ecological change. Wildfires, which, these things also interact. Wildfires remove ground cover and make soils impermeable to rain. This increases the risk of flooding in areas where earthquakes may have already exposed new surfaces to erosion and increased steam power by raising land elevation. As the fires, are coming under control, as I said, there were fear of mudslides. Also, just to put a capper on this, California has experienced extreme drought in its history. And when I say extreme, I mean really extreme. In the Middle Ages, California had a drought of about 220 years, from 890 to about 1100, and another of about 140 years. If anything, California is probably due for a big drought, and if anything now, global warming is increasing this, but California has plenty of is getting more rain than it has traditionally, if you look at the whole history, you know. Same thing with earthquakes. Los Angeles seems to have settled into kind of a quiet period of earthquakes, but you never know. They're saying the faults are talking to each other, and there's always that idea of the big one coming. Okay, so yeah, so has been the decision to base the safety of the present and future generations almost entirely upon short-sighted extrapolations from the disaster record of the past half century. And with a bureaucratic faith in the immortality of public works drives exclusively from attenuated, almost meaningless official time frames. In effect, we think ourselves gods upon the land, but we're really just tourists, as Mike Davis says. Okay. Um, all right. So the next thing is I want to just talk. There's Malibu burning in the flames, and in LA as where the desert meets the sea. Okay. So I want to talk about global warming and the fires. All right. Late August to early October is the fire season in Los Angeles. Downtown is usually shrouded in acrid yellow smog while heat waves billow down Wilshire Boulevard. So it was very unusual this happened in January. It's a sign of changing weather brought on by global warming. 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded in Los Angeles and the hottest year on record globally. 2023 was the second hottest. The last 10 years have been the hottest years humans have ever experienced. 2024, the average temperature of Earth hit 162 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, exceeding the 1.5 limit that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had been desperately badgering nations to hold on for fear that relentlessly rising emissions will at some point trigger runaway global warming that no human power can stop. And perhaps that's what LA found itself in the middle of. We're entering a dangerous new era of extreme weather. The warning is supercharging megastorms, hurricanes, floods, and, as we saw, ferocious fires. Um, okay. Also, as I said, they're unusual this time of year, but January was bone dry. LA is enduring a long drought, the second driest period in the city's recorded history. The Santa Ana winds are stronger, gusting to more than 100 miles an hour or hurricane strength. And all of this was a kind of perfect storm that accounted for this. Okay. And all also due to this kind of relentless suburban expansion of LA, as well as underfunded fire departments, statewide divisions over water use, and the same, and all of these different igniters. Wildfires are more frequent, burning hotter, moving faster, and lasting longer. As somebody said, the California fire season now has 365 days. When wildfires reach urban housing, they burn a lot hotter, powered by exploding propane tanks, vehicle fuel tanks, EV batteries, and the tinder of old dry wooden houses. The smoke is also far more toxic with all the plastics, rubber, paint, chemicals, and metals in buildings and vehicles. Intense heat, dryness, and wind turn fires into megafires. The best fire departments with the best equipment can't stop fires driven by hurricane force winds. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Climate change is making wildfires bigger, faster, and harder to stop. One of the things as one of these intrudes on another is this kind of intrusion of animals into different habitats. You get skunks, raccoons, possums, coyotes, and snakes. And black bears in Los Angeles are becoming a common sight as their natural habitat shrinks and they venture into urban areas. My friend in Brentwood frequently encounters coyotes, actually. Um, so we have all these, uh, sort of natural, paranatural phenomena, garbage-eating coyotes, black bears in hot tubs, plague-carrying squirrels, killer bees, all taken as a symptom of a larger crisis in the relationship between the metropolis and its environment. Okay. Uh, and of course, what does this come down to? A main thing is the failure to take on the fossil fuel industry. Uh, with the last two COPs, global climate change conference is being held in oil-producing states in Dubai and Azerbaijan and chaired by oil titans. Producers are frantically pumping oil and gas from one end of the earth to the other, opening new fields that the world is glutted with oil, and prices have fallen to their lowest level in decades. Um, and even as the USA is the world's largest producer, Trump is urging Americans to gorge themselves on fossil fuels, claiming we face an energy emergency, which is not true at all, which is true only in his mind. He wants to drill baby drill, all of which will exacerbate this. Frank Lloyd Wright's apprentice once said, in terms of production, these things that we have, iPhones, electric cars, Internet of Things, most things are not designed for the needs of people, but for the needs of manufacturers to sell to people. Instead of making products that we actually need to be durable, long-lasting, and recyclable, to conserve resources and reduce emissions, like Apple, which assigns their best and brightest engineers, designers, and marketers to devise ways to make products wear out, become obsolete, and disposable faster, and must be replaced by new and better products. The Guardian's George Monbiot said, "There is no techno fix. That's always the capitalist solution. We're going to invent something which is going to completely change this." A 90% cut in emissions requires not only that growth stops, but that most of the planes which are flying today are grounded. I recognize this will not be a popular message, but it's necessary. Okay, and of course now we have AI. Besides taking your jobs and stealing your IP, Wall Street is driving an investment frenzy like no other as companies scramble to integrate AI for fear of being left behind. Meanwhile, AI demands stupendous quantities of electricity to process its large language model data. Tech titans at Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and others, and they're scrambling to buy or build nuclear power plants for each company. In May, there you see Microsoft rebooting 3 Mile Island. What could go wrong? They reported that the total planet warming impact is about 30% higher today than it was in 2020 with all this stuff. And as I said, Microsoft just signed a contract to reboot the shuttered 3 Mile Island reactor for its own use. Well, the answer to this part of the thing is, of course, to suppress the fossil fuel combustion that's heating the planet and endangering the lives of firefighters. And, okay, now, part 3 here, this is about the neoliberal and now the post-neoliberal moment in terms of government. So one of the things is, we had an extreme example. You have in Los Angeles an extreme example of a neoliberal city, with first Republican and then Democratic administrations being callous and uncaring about the population. The point of Democrats is to pretend they do care, and of the Republicans, well, to just attack, but it amounts to largely the same thing, neglect. California had many years of Republican rule, nary a Democrat in the state. Brought us the automobile, track houses, Richard Nixon, HUAC, and made a few people very wealthy. But now, now we have the neoliberal rule of the Democrats, and I did want to focus. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Okay, not yet, but let me see if I can show. This I think really telling moment, and that is about Karen Bass, who was the vice chair of the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, which is the CIA's soft power arm. She epitomizes everything that is wrong with the black political class, according to Black Agenda Report. She was also chair of the House Foreign Relations Committee's subcommittee on Africa, intimately involved in regime change and imperial control of Africa. Who better than an African-American woman to represent this? The NED, by the way, was founded by Ronald Reagan and his CIA director, William Casey, in 1983. One of the early officials of the NED was John Bolton. And as this sort of says, Alan Weinstein, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. And the NED was found, which Karen Bass represents, was founded after the church committee hearings, which started to expose the CIA. So they needed to have something which would conceal it. And so we have the wonderful sounding name of, National Endowment for Democracy. And of course, it claims to be using soft power, but what it's really doing is softening up the underbelly of any country that opposes them and getting ready for regime change. Now, um, so when when Karen Bass went to, by the way, she cheered on the invasion of Libya, and was effusive of her praise of the bombing of Libya, which turned the best healthcare and education system on the African continent into a failed state that promotes slavery auctions. That is NED style democracy. Now in Ghana, which is where she went, Ghana is now aligned with the belt of nations in the Sahel, that is the sub-Saharan Africa, which opposes U.S. imperialism. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have all expelled the French. They've organized their own shared units to combat terrorism in their states and have moved out of the U.S. orbit. So she was there for the inauguration and undoubtedly to keep tabs on the movement in Ghana, of this president of Ghana, and and to make sure that Ghana stays in the U.S. orbit, and that it doesn't go too close to these other three countries, which are opposing the U.S. take, sort of in Africa. She was warned, by the way, before she went. She was warned, by the way, before she went, that there were emergency conditions for a fire, but her priority was keeping a new Ghanaian president in line with U.S. interests. Um, so that's where she was when the fire broke out. Okay, so then she comes back because her focus is on keeping the empire going both at home and abroad. All right, now I want to see if I can show this. I hope I can. This is just a really short clip here. Okay, let's see. All right, I hope I have sound. I don't know if I do or not, but I'm just going to show this clip, but there's a,
But make no
can you
mistake,
hear it?
Los Angeles will
Okay, good.
rebuild stronger than ever. Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. Los Angeles, together is how we will get through this. Through the heroism of our firefighters, the vigilance of Angelinos, and the spirit of our city.
Okay, so, uh, you know, so yes, you just go to URL and you'll find everything you need. I mean, it's worth showing because it just indicates how cut out these people are, how unrelated they are to what people are going through. And by the way, it's good that we have heroicism, because just heroic isn't enough because this is extreme, so we have to have heroicism. Anyway, so that was her announcement. That's the Giuliani type announcement about how much we care about you, kind of thing. But she kind of did it. She kind of did it badly. Okay, I'm going to go back now to the PowerPoint. Let's see. Okay. Um, well, let's see. Okay. Here we are. So. Now, Bass did indeed approve a budget for the fire department's current fiscal year that was 23 million less than the previous year. She cut the fire department budget by 23 million dollars. And at the same time announced a proposal to increase the budget of the LA Police Department and hire hundreds of new officers in the mayor's first city budget. The budget would increase the LAPD's budget by almost 119 million, 6.3% increase. Decrease the fire department, increase the police. That's the neoliberal state. Hiding behind its care is repression. Okay, so let's see. All right, now there's one more thing, one more sort of part of this that I need. I want to bring up, and that's the water and LA water supply because it was an issue because the firefighters ran out of water. So where did the water go? Well, there's of course the famous. Let's see if I can play that clip from Chinatown. I think I can. Okay, let's see. Um, okay, I'm going to play this clip from Chinatown and hopefully you can hear it.
I'm doing it. Going to be a lot of irate citizens when they find out that they're paying for water that they're not going to get.
Oh, that's all taken care of. See, Mr. Gibbs, either you bring the water to L.A. or you bring L.A. to the water.
How are you going to do that?
By incorporating the valley into the city. Simple as that.
How much are you worth?
I have no idea. How much do you want?
I just want to know what you're worth. Over 10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gibbs. The future.
Okay, back to the contemporary water situation. Now, what's come out, one of the places where water is it's being hoarded by billionaires. So the Resnicks are hoarding water and for their pistachio crop. And by the way, their company is called the Wonderful Company. So they are the biggest agricultural company, and during the last drought, they worked together to take over Southern California's water supply. They started with pistachios, then almonds. They have a controlling interest in the Kern Water Storage Facility, a state project built with taxpayer funds, which stores up to 5 million gallons of, 5 billion gallons of water. And it's controlled by this company. They've also rewritten the water rules. There's a water rules called the Monterey Rules, and the Monterey Rules say water goes first to urban sites, and then it goes to agriculture. The reason being that agriculture, which monopolizes 80% of the water, is only 2% of California's GDP. So it's far greater. So they rewrote the Monterey Rules, and they said which said no to agriculture, so now the water goes to them, it goes to agriculture and to the leading agriculturists, the Resnicks. And what happened, just like Noah Cross, in the last drought, the Resnicks sold California's water back to the city. I mean, you can't get grosser than that, So they took it and sold it back to them. They donated millions to politicians and research institutions. Their favorite is Dianne Feinstein, the chair of the Senate Water Committee. They brought entire studies on how water could be managed. Departments of University of California in the University of California system, and they also they're very upset about Iran, and they've requested embargoes on Iran because they're so troubled by it. But why are they troubled by Iran? Because Iran is their leading competitor for pistachios. That's why. That's what really troubles them about Iran. Anyway, okay, so I think the last thing I wanted to just talk about in terms of the neoliberal city is the Olympics, which are coming up. Gentrification by Olympics. Now, the Olympics will work well will go hand in hand with getting people out of their homes, because of the fires. And in the last one in Paris here, the idea was, the New York Times put it, can the Olympics rejuvenate one of France's poorest corners? Well, the way that the Olympics rejuvenate neighborhoods, as Dave Zirin has always been very good at pointing out, is by clearing them away and getting the poor people out of the neighborhoods. And that is probably being designed to happen in LA as well, and will be given a further boost by the fires. So, okay, now the next part is unequal class and racial areas. Okay, so let's see. The fires and unequal class and racial disparities. Okay, so there are some, just some contradictions to point to. What is most distinctive about Los Angeles is not simply its conjugation of earthquakes, wildfires, and floods, but its uniquely explosive mixture of natural hazards and social contradictions. So let's just point to some of those contradictions. One of them was the prison population was used to fight the fires. So these prisoners in California prisons were, they were making somewhere between $5 a day and $2 an hour out fighting fires in which they could die, or in which, their lungs could and probably are badly damaged. So that's one thing. Also, the whole idea of uneven rebuilding. Um, in the 1994 earthquake, federal relief was showered on rich and poor alike, which is not good because the poor needed much more money to rebuild, but the rich got just as much. 14,000 households in Beverly Hills 90210 received FEMA grants. And so Malibu and the Pacific Palisades, the Malibu coast, where Mike Davis calls it where hyperbole meets the surf. Bassin, in altogether different weather than Los Angeles. If you've ever been in Los Angeles, temperature is 85 in downtown. I'm sorry, the temperature is 85, 20 degrees cooler than downtown. Malibu experiences, in Malibu, you experience yet another boring day. Whereas downtown, of course, you experience the extreme heat. Under Eisenhower, the Malibu conflagration would be punctually followed by reconstruction on a larger and ever more exclusive scale, as land use regulations and sometimes even the fire code were relaxed to accommodate fire victims in Malibu. As a result, renters and modest homeowners were displaced from areas like Broad Beach, Paradise Cove, and Point Dume. These were used to clear areas in Malibu by wealthy pyrophiles, encouraged by artificially cheap fire insurance, socialized disaster relief, and an expansive public commitment to defend Malibu. Most of Malibu remained inaccessible to the general public. For people of color, moreover, it was absolutely off limits. As historians of the coastal access battle put it, the 7 million people within an hour's drive of Malibu got Beach Boys music and surfer movies, but the 20,000 residents got the beach. So, this is a kind of, the story of Malibu. Okay, I did want to talk about Altadena. Let's see, just a little bit more here. Yeah, this is another disaster. This is after the '94 earthquake, Northridge. These are the tremors that followed. 11 days later, while the tabloids were still shedding crocodile tears for burned out movie stars, another fire, invisible to most of the media, killed 3 residents and critically burned 12 others in a dingy downtown residential hotel. The death toll was the same as in the Malibu blaze, but property damage differed by several orders of magnitude. Once again, the double standard of fire disaster. Okay. All right. Let's see. And which fires will most likely further gentrify. Okay. Now, just to talk a bit about Altadena. Nearly 21% of the residents were directly affected by the Eaton fire. No, I'm sorry, nearly 21 who were affected are black residents in Altadena, and many of them are 65 or older. Altadena was a historic middle-class suburb, actually, where blacks had moved out from the inner city and had accumulated, wealth, which they were intent on passing on to the next generation. It's always been a thing of African Americans not being able to pass on wealth. Well, there was wealth accumulated in Altadena, but now with the burning of Altadena, that's not so much going to happen. It's very painful because it feels like a family of people have been destroyed, and I don't know if that family will come together again, with property in California being as expensive as it is, one of the residents said. Older black residents were among those who were killed. A man, 82, another 66, and another 95, another 83. Okay. You had the black working class moving to the valley. Altadena was overwhelmingly white in the 1950s, the beginning of the civil rights movement. When black residents slowly began to appear, they were not embraced, and they really had to carve out this place for themselves. They were pushed out of urban housing in neighboring Pasadena. They made their way in, and the area became sought after by families from the South. About a decade later, the black proportion of the Altadena population peaked at nearly 43%. They would get, and this is what this is the developers. They would get white owners in modest areas to sell their houses cheap and then bring in black people and sell them at higher prices. So when they came in, they had to pay much more than the houses were worth. So there's a lot of land that was exchanged in a panic mode. And, as I said, this was accumulated wealth in black families, and many of them passed their houses down from parents to children. Uh, More than half of black households in Altadena earn more than 100,000 a year, which is really middle class in Los Angeles. Uh, as someone said, when you lose a middle class black community, it's a loss of culture. It's also a loss to the next generation. And of course, many of them may not be able to afford to leave if their insurance is not enough to pay off their mortgages. You know, um, and so they may have to leave, or they may be stuck. Now, the last thing in terms of the unequal thing is this idea of private equity firms waiting in the wings to buy this, what Naomi Klein called disaster capitalism. And that is happening. Swaths of a neighborhood like Altadena are bought up by equity investors looking to make money. The neighborhood will become not just different, but less affordable. Real estate vultures are circling the middle class community of Altadena and other burned out parts of Los Angeles, hungry to turn a profit from fire victims still struggling with where they'll live and how they'll rebuild their homes and lives. And Fortune magazine said this of all places. So you have to trust it. It's hard to draw parallels between it's hard not to draw parallels between Altadena and Hawaii's Lahaina. Both tight-knit communities of mostly middle-class people situated in an idyllic landscape devastated by wildfire. Analysis showed that Maui's population was reduced by at least 1,000 residents as a result of the island's 2023 fires. Altadena locals are concerned their patch of paradise will go in a similar direction. Just to mention, Larry Fink, who's the owner of BlackRock, which is the richest investment company in the world, said it might take 10 years to rebuild. Which, okay, that was not Larry Fink saying, how sorry he was. That was him saying, do you really want to wait 10 years? Maybe you should just get out and sell to what was once Larry Fink's other company, which is Blackstone. The two of them split, but Blackstone is a major investor buying homes, and they're really buying up a stock of relatively inexpensive single-family homes since the 70s in growing metro areas. And they're depleting the inventory of the precise houses that might otherwise be obtainable for younger working and middle class households in the city, where those workers can easily find good paying jobs. So, so the vultures are circling both Blackstone and BlackRock. Okay, the last section, hedge funds buying houses. Hollywood as financial site of devastation. Okay, so just to say, there's some points here. The first one is about film and television workers. Many workers in the industry who have seen jobs dry up say they now face a choice. That is, LA production is, you may know or may not, is really sort of tanking. The peak era of television is over. It's been over now for 2 years, and this statistic should really sort of give you an idea of what's going on here, and so I can wrap up in a few minutes. But when the fires burst, and production had to be halted, there were only 2 films shooting in Hollywood where production had to be halted. That's how much Hollywood is no longer a site of production. Rather, it's a site of financialization of the offices and sometimes of post-production. But very little is actually shot in Hollywood any longer, So it's become a kind of empty disaster site. It's a sort of place like China or the U.S. where goods flow into it from outside the actual production. The place where you do see actual production is the porn industry, still thriving, and out in the valley, although there was a thing about that, but that is still going strong actually. But you don't see so much actual Hollywood production, and people are losing jobs and having to flee. Now, all of this was what they said the reason for this was the strike, which was not the reason at all. They were already cutting back, the producers. They'd already decided they were going online, and the strikes of 2 years ago, last summer, yeah, 2 summers ago, the strikes of 2 summers ago were really about the actors and the writers trying to hold on. That's really all they were about, against the onslaught of IA and against the onslaught of moving to digital. So, yeah. So, location shoots in the region fell last year to its second lowest total on record, behind only 2020, the year the pandemic stopped working. So, they do have they do, there is a lot of jobs there, but not so much production. They're going to other states which are offering bigger tax credits. Okay, so all right. Now, just to talk a bit about the destruction of LA and okay, so destruction of Los Angeles has been a central theme or image uh, in at least 138 novels and films since 1909. It's the city and its suburbs have been destroyed on average 3 times a year in terms of LA and the imagination of disaster. Now, the century before the 20th century, the 19th, was the destruction of London, the metropolis most persecuted in fiction between 1885 and 1940. It was imagined as a horrifying spectacle, this destruction, equivalent to the death of Western civilization itself. The obliteration of Los Angeles, by contrast, is often depicted as, or at least secretly experienced as, a victory for civilization. But both sides of their respective capital configurations, that is, London was the site of the industrial capital in the 19th century. Los Angeles, the site of, of not what do you call it? Production, media capital. And of course, now that may have moved to Silicon Valley, which is now really the site. Okay, yeah, the destruction in the industrial period of the center of industrialization in LA, the center of financialization of a financialized industry. So now that destruction is taken as destruction is taken as kind of accomplished, and we have post-apocalyptic TV and cinema. And actually, I'm going to just go back to this. Oops. Sorry. I think I just go here. Wait. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, shoot. Okay. So in terms of, this was a little, yeah. Okay. So, I have an article in the next jump cut, and it's called Climate Catastrophe and Post-Apocalyptic Television. Don't worry, be glum. And the idea is just really that, that creative artists have accepted the idea that the world is over. So the question of these series becomes what to make of it now that it's over. One of these is Station 11. It's a traveling theater company. At least there's art after the apocalypse. So they travel around. That's the best they can do. And James Podnowiecki from the Times quoted a line he loves from the show called, "I don't care that the world was ending because it is the world." Was sort of endorsed by the Times. And he described the series as the most uplifting show about life at the end of the world you are likely to see. In other words, you have the bourgeois sort of critics cheering this kind of thing on, Okay. Now I do want to just point out, let me see if, I hope I can show it. Yes, I want to end with this, which is the last scene from Escape from LA, John Carpenter's film. And because it ends a bit differently. And however, one of the things that Mike Davis says is that you know that in LA disaster fiction, that it's rooted in racial anxiety. And that does show up in Escape from LA because they're being, LA, which is broken off from the mainland, and the mainland itself is being threatened by the Shining Path, these barbarians from South America. So let's see, wait, I've got to get this up. Whoops. Where are we here? Okay, yes. Oops. Okay. Nope. Okay, here it is. Oh shoot, I can't. Wait, I'm having trouble. Hmm. The okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this is the end of Escape from LA. I just want to play that. Oops.
Gonna have my radius. Round up every available man. Hold it.
Sir, the enemy is less than 2 minutes from our shore.
What's the debate, Pushkin? Us or them?
Okay, so this is the president.
Shut down America. You lose, they win. Where things change, where they stay the same.
So what are you going to do?
Disappear.
That's what you plug in 666. He holds
He's
the
entered
world
code.
in his hand.
No target code. So we're going to shut down the entire planet.
Push that button. Everything we've accomplished for the past 500 years will be finished. Our technology, our way of life, our history. We'll have to start all over again. Who would think? This kid.
Shut down the earth.
Okay, and the earth goes dark, and he decides that it would be better if we just redid the last 500 years, which I think is not such a bad ending, actually, for LA. So I'm going to leave you there and stop and ask and take questions. Oops. Let's see.
Okay, Dennis, thank you so much. This was really great. Mashup of Mike Davis and contemporary events and Hollywood and so on, which is just more or less what I expected from you today. This is really great. So in terms of our conversation with everyone participating, please just, I think, we have 12 people in the Zoom room right now. I think for the moment at least, if you have a question or comment, just speak up. And if it gets complicated, then we'll institute some procedures for taking turns. But if you have a question or comment, just speak up, and we'll have a conversation. Olive, go ahead.
Hi, I've read some of your work on film noir that I really love. And yeah, I'm honored to meet you today. And what I like about your work about film noir is that there's a deep attention to class. And you've done an exquisite job of kind of a conjunctural mapping of all the ecological and political economic factors that go into the LA fires. And my question is, what's the Marxist response? Like, how do we think about this as Marxists?
Well, I'm hoping these are all ways of thinking of it as Marxists. I mean, so in as I started out saying, any materialist history has to start with topography and geography, because that's where economics starts, and that's what Braudel teaches us, and so that's where I tried to start. So I think that's a beginning. We also have to look when we look at climate change. Okay, we can recount all the terrible things that are going on, but the fact is, unless we bring climate change to the fossil fuel corporations that are destroying the earth, for their own profit rather than for people's needs, we're not going to go very much further. And so I think that's a Marxist interpretation. Um, the the third part, well, this is sort of, I did try to lay out a bit, an idea of the neoliberal state and what it's about, how it essentially, under the guise of care, like USAID and National Endowment for Democracy, only cares about itself, preserving itself, keeping the empire afloat, and that kind of stuff. And then in the fourth part, I really tried to show some of the class distinctions, in terms of like how the fires work out, how a disaster capitalism has worked in the past in Los Angeles in terms of Naomi Klein's work, and yeah, and I think Altadena is really the case in point. The destruction of Altadena really is horrible. It's really a terrible thing. And a black middle class destroyed. But the larger point is that this is going to be an attack on the entire Los Angeles middle class, not just black middle class. They're going to be forced to move. A lot of people will have to move, not only in the entertainment industry, but in other industries. The insurance is not going to cover, they have to, they can't uninsure them, but how much they will cover, we don't know. And then in the fourth part, I was, my Marxist focus on the industry is, first of all, to focus on the workers in the industry, and I've written pretty extensively about the strikes and what they're about, and also to combat this idea that the reason the industry is going to hell is because of the strikes. That has nothing to do with what's going on, has nothing to do with where the industry is going. The strikes didn't cost them that much, but they were already cutting back, and the strikes were the excuse to cut back further. So I think those are all class considerations, which I think are all parts of a Marxist analysis, which I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
Jacqueline.
Yeah, I have questions about what industry is going to replace industries in Los Angeles. In the post-war era, it was the defense industry, tremendous amount of defense industry in there, which, if everyone knows, I'm an art freak, so that was like part of spilled over into the art world. Now, Long Beach is one of the major ports in the United States, and that, there's a lot of stuff coming through there. So the Longshore Union has a lot of mechanization, but it's the short haulers who've been, trying to organize them for years. But I'd also heard that there was still a lot of small industries in Los Angeles, like in furniture manufacture, various small manufacturers. What's going to happen to those industries with the fires, if I was told correctly? I mean, what's going to replace the industry in Los Angeles?
I don't know. I guess it remains to be seen. I will say that one of the small industries is galleries, is the art world. There are more art galleries and art spaces in Los Angeles than in any city in the world. It's quite amazing, this scene that's grown up there. And what's going to happen to them, I don't know, because they're all just sort of trying to survive. So Will they? Well, certainly not all of them will. The entertainment industry, there's initiatives to essentially really increase the tax abatements for for film and television, so that so that they come back. They're now shooting in like Georgia. Georgia's a major site, but and there's a couple of other states too. In fact, most states are offering something. So that's going to be a question of, and also the entertainment industry is trimming. So if you look at television, the peak year was 2022, and 2023, 2024 have both really, really gone down. So there's a lot less television that's being shot. The porn industry, I think, is still going to thrive. Just to say, out in the valley, they never go across the mountains to get into LA, but the small manufacturers, I don't know. I'm not sure, And yes, the port system is a major way of goods coming into from China, essentially, from China, as our fearless leader says, and getting unloaded and then going across the rest of the country, So that's not going to disappear, That there's going to be well, I don't know, unless Trump slaps more of a tariff on goods and they don't come in from China anymore, I suppose that would dry things up, but.
Yeah, but it's not a major employer. I mean, long short, it's highly automated, and
Well, I think the last strike wasn't the last strike. The issue in the last strike was to stop the automation, right?
On the East Coast.
On the East Coast, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're very much afraid of that. Yeah, it's more automated on the West Coast. Yeah.
right, and it's highly automated, and I mean, there have been strikes on like how many containers can be stacked on a ship, because if it's 6 and you fall off a container, that's it, you're dead, and the companies wanted like 8, I don't remember, but I'm just wondering, because Los Angeles was a major money, it's where a lot of money was made, and now with the fires gone, I'm wondering what's going to happen to that. It's a big hole in the economy, I would think.
Yeah, in the U.S. economy, I read a statistic what they were saying. What if it does really tank? If nothing comes back, what's it going to do to the U.S. economy? And I don't know. I think the statistic was the worst would be a 2% drop in GDP. So it's big, but not catastrophic. If this doesn't, if this doesn't work. The other thing too in the entertainment industry, since that's the one I know the best, is AI. You're just seeing less production. With the green screens and with AI, you just don't need to go to places anymore. Much less go to Georgia. You don't even have to go out of the studio, and you can make it look like you're on location now. And plus actors losing their voices being used. This was the whole thing about the strike, that actors were very afraid that they would lose everything, and that these, remember the whole thing with what is her name?
Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah, Scarlett Johansson, who has this husky voice that's her trademark, and they had copied it, and they were using it, and she sued, and she won, actually. That they could not copy her voice, assign it to another face, and use it. But these are the kinds of things that are going to really, really go on, and they're going to really be big issues. I saw a woman who was from the Screenwriters Guild, and they said, well, with AI, it's moving so fast. What are you going to do? And she said, well, we did the best we could. This was last year at a television conference here. There's another contract in what will now be 2 more years, and we'll have to look at where it is. But they're obviously behind the gun, because the whole idea of AI is to move faster than regulations and unions can. So Shoshana Zuboff has this great book about how these things are written into the tech world, actually. I think it's called the age of, is it called the age of surveillance capitalism? Something like that.
Oh, sure.
What? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really,
Shoshana
really,
Zuboff. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
it's very good about that, about how they deliberately are designed to outwit regulation.
On the other hand, Musk and Trump are getting rid of all the regulations anyway. So,
So that's the Republican way of outwitting regulation.
right.
You just rip them apart. Yeah. That's why I say, neoliberalism, and now we're sort of in this post-neoliberalism, which is just a rampant return to imperialism and colonialism. I mean,
Plunder.
that's what Trump is trying to do. That's what he keeps floating, to see if anybody's interested. So far, no one is, but he'll keep floating.
Zach put a question in the chat, wondering if there is really a market for AI-produced media. But one response to that might be that, to a certain extent, it becomes harder and harder to tell if it's AI-produced or not, right?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yes, can you or can you not? I did an interview with a Puerto Rican media activist who has his own company, and he said, AI's just all it is plagiarism. That's what it is. That's how he described it. And he thought something to be sort of fiercely contested. And really to be bounded. And the screenwriters did a good job saying, look, this is the thing. We will use AI. We can use AI. It will be helpful in writing our scripts, but you will not use AI to write our scripts. That's where we draw the line, because in the last writer's strike, the fear was that the question is who owns the script, or who has the written by credit. So it was a sort of attempt to return to the earlier years of the studio, where AI would produce the first script. That's their go-to plan. That's what they hope. AI produces the first script, and then a high-priced writer would be called in to make the edits. But the script then would be produced by the studio production company. So we're back to Hollywood in the 40s. And that's what the writers, that's why they struck. That's one of the big reasons. You cannot do this. We're not going to allow this. But as you said, it becomes more and more difficult to discern which is which as AI becomes better. And I hate to keep returning to this, but the next book is about the porn industry. It's about the corporate takeover of the porn industry, because they're making too much money, and the mob, even for the mob, because the mob is controlling it, and the mob says, look, and this is what did happen. And they say there's just too much money out here. We have to clean up the porn industry so we can profit from it, just like any other industry. But yeah, I mean, AI is threatening the porn industry also. It's threatening all of these industries. It's a gigantic, as my friend says, plagiarism, and of course is designed to take people's jobs en masse. And the less said about that, the better. That's how they deal with it. No one will talk about that aspect of AI.
Yeah, they throw dust in our eyes by saying, oh, it's going to end the human race, or it's going to,
Yeah.
And meanwhile, what's really happening is that it's either degrading the quality of people's jobs, or it's actually eliminating people's jobs.
Yes, that's what's going to happen. Yes.
Although it won't eliminate nearly as many jobs as the claims are. But nonetheless, Zach has a question. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought your comments on the porn industry are interesting, because I just finished reading Empire of Illusion by Chris Hedges.
Okay.
And he talks about an analysis. He quotes it from somebody else, I can't remember who, but they studied the collapse of empire, and like the Romans and a bunch of different examples that they had cited. And this kind of ties into like bread and circuses, where one of the characteristics of dying empires was an obsession with spectacle, and especially like sexual hedonism. Yep. So do you see that pattern taking hold, and maybe is that something that your book touches on?
Well,
or what you mentioned?
The private detective in the next book He goes to an AA meeting and meets a porn actress, and that's how the book starts. So, but yes, I mean the porn industry now, globally, the profits are supposed to be $1 trillion. So, that is roughly the same amount of money as the above ground film industry makes, maybe even a little more. And that's the really dark secret. Like, what are the lines between these two? You know, like each has to be very careful to reaffirm the lines, because the lines get more tentative every day. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think that is part. I think that the this decaying empire's bread and circuses is porn and streaming. You know, yeah, I think
Streaming
I
porn.
agree. It's a good point.
So where is there any kind of a firewall or between so-called, if it's $1 trillion industry, the porn industry, uh, why isn't or is major capital, legitimate capital being invested in it? If
It
it's
is
that
being
profitable.
invested in it. It
And
is.
how is that? What are the mechanisms of that? Because it's not particularly public, but
No, it's not talked.
we're
They don't
talked
really
about.
want. They don't really wanted to know, but there's too much money out there. The credit card companies are heavily into it. The major financiers, have gone into it. And there's this whole thing. Pornhub is the leading thing, but there's a book that came out last year by this woman. I just got it actually, and it says that the porn industry is a very dirty industry. Okay, I mean, even if it's quote cleaned up. So the idea was that, well, Pornhub is the clean aspect of it. Well, this woman went through and investigated, and it is a lot underage performers, rape. It's just the worst. It's just a lot of the worst that you could imagine. And so she is trying to clean it up. She's not against porn, but she's against she's against the exploitation. Although I don't know, I think the whole industry is exploitative. But anyway, it is kind of interesting. But yes, no, they're in it. They're in it for sure. The major financiers are invested in it and wanting to.
Jacqueline?
I don't want to spend too much time on the porn industry because I find it so upsetting. But I just wanted to make a comment that I was talking to a group of African American women who were outraged by how white liberals got so upset about sex trafficking, about other countries, but completely neglected the sexual trafficking of African American girls in the United States. So, I mean, to me, there's a lot of potential there for action. I mean, these women were very, very upset about it, and the crimes are truly horrendous that you run into. I'm sorry, I get very upset about it because I work in the courts and we run into these exploited women, and it can't be cleaned up. The business cannot be cleaned up
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. And I will
Yeah.
stop right there before I get too upset.
Yeah, and that isn't remarked upon at all. I mean, all of the shows that deal with trafficking, and almost most shows do now, deal with Eastern European women being trafficked to Western Europe and then to the U.S. and whatever. And of course, there is a really good, what's her name? Whitney Webb has done really, really good work on underage trafficking in the upper class. And what's the guy's name? The guy who Maxwell.
Epstein?
What? Yeah,
Jeffrey
Epstein.
Epstein?
Yes, yes, Jeffrey Epstein, and his wife. Who the guy who supposedly killed himself in prison. To save the Clintons, I guess. Anyway, and Prince Charles, but whatever. But it's a list that supposedly is never going to come out. But it's yeah. But there's also that too, you know. There's this sort of upper class trafficking in underclass women. You know?
I've been trying to formulate a thought or a question or a comment about just the uneven development of Los Angeles and the kind of the arc of development of the film industry over the 20th century and the first part of the 21st, and that your notion that it is basically hollowed out and no longer it may be viable, but it is not. It's not a major employer in Los Angeles anymore. It sounds like it's not a center of capital investment anymore, perhaps. And is it in terminal decline? Is Los Angeles going to become like a museum city where there'll still be studios that tourists can visit, but nothing is actually happening there? Is it already? And then you talk about the galleries, and then you'd also think about the Getty and the LA County Museum and so on as this. It is a major art center of the world, but is it going to become more like Venice, perhaps, as just a tourist destination and a luxury site of luxury consumption, but what's going to keep it as a major metropolis? And then, that feeds into the question of, should it have been ever a major metropolis, given the ecology?
Yeah, well, that's part of that's what Mike Davis is really arguing, that it was completely exploited in a way that made no sense, and that now Los Angeles is sort of reaping the whirlwind, and that development was very, very short-sighted and continues to be very short-sighted, I don't know. I mean, yes, it still contributes quite a lot. The entertainment industry still contributes quite a lot. I think I had the figures here. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Oh, let's see. I don't know. It's it was 27%. Okay. Before the 2023 strikes, it was 35%. After the strikes, 27%. And one would of the total film and television jobs in the country, and one would expect that it's probably going to go down a bit. But it's really difficult to say that the fires are doing this, or what Naomi Klein argues, disaster capitalism. That is, they're using the fires to again cut, because they really did over produce. They really made a mistake around digital and around these companies that they thought once they were digital, they were going to make so much money, and it hasn't really happened in many ways, except for Netflix. Sort of Netflix, Amazon are the successes. The others are somewhat in trouble, and that's why things are not going so well, So I don't know. I think it's not going to dry up, that's for sure. And there's lots of there is still lots of television. When you say we're not in peak TV, peak TV saw, geez, I don't remember how many series, maybe what was it? It was 600 series a year. Okay, when you say we're not in peak TV, that means we're down to about 400. So there's still plenty of production going on, and it still contributes all these other jobs, as they keep saying. But yeah, but it is sort of declining. The bet on streaming TV for a lot of these companies hasn't paid off. And the way they've chosen to deal with it is by cutting instead of by investing more. You know, that's why Netflix actually is making money. Netflix didn't drop their amount of investment. They just kept producing product. Whereas a lot of the others cut back. Warner Brothers, remember, there's this whole thing about Batgirl, a 90, what is it? 93, no, was, I don't know. How much was it? It was really an expensive film, almost, God, it was almost $100 million film. It was shot and edited, and they chose to put it on the shelf and take the tax write-off rather than release it. It was the first major superhero film with a black female superhero in the heroine in the lead, also.
Oh, God.
Why'd they do that?
So, anyway, but Warner Brothers has been really awful about that. Really terrible. They also had TNT, and that had this series, which I liked very much, called Snowpiercer by Bong Joon-ho, who did Parasite. And he's got a new series. He's got a new film actually coming out, I think, in a couple of weeks. And he's also doing a series, I think, of Parasite, actually. But anyway, Snowpiercer was very good, ran 3 seasons, very class-conscious series. And they said, nope. The 4th season was all shot in the can, and TNT and Warner Brothers at TNT said, no, we're not gonna put it on the air. And so it finally found a home at AMC. It wasn't really good. It wasn't a great season, but they did stuff like that. That's how they dealt with this sort of short-termism. They just cut, and you lose money that way. You can't make money. So it's a kind of losing proposition.
Well, on that note, we might wrap things up unless other people have some comments to make. Dennis, any closing thoughts? This has really been great. We look forward to hopefully doing a reading group before too long on your novels. So we'll be in touch about that.
Just to say that would be an exploration of this kind of Los Angeles and its various industries, actually, and also the layers of corruption. The first book is about the one that you're reading, Left of Eden, is about HUAC in 1947. And the second book is about the arms industry. It's called A Hello to Arms. And it's about why the arms industry zoomed ahead in a time of peace and what happened and how that was arranged in 1948, which is a really crucial year in the LA economy and also in the economy of the U.S. as a whole and in the arms manufacturing economy. The third book is about the LAPD, because you can't really write about Los Angeles without writing about the LAPD and its relationship with the Mexican-American community of Boyle Heights, and also its relationship to Big Pharma at that time, actually. And then the fourth book is about another thing that you must write about if you're writing about LA, and that's real estate and the real estate industry. And it's about all of these ways that even after the real estate laws were changed and segregation was outlawed, they figured ways to segregate. As I talked about Altadena, when the black population moved into Altadena, they didn't want them there. And what the developers did was they scared white homeowners out of Altadena, and then they raised the prices and sold them to the black middle class that was moving in for highly inflated rates. So you have that kind of stuff that's going on. This is about a town in the South called Torrance, and about Torrance and what it does. And then the fifth book, the one that's just out now, is called The Dark Ages, and that is about HUAC's return to Hollywood in 1951, actually, in which was really savaged the industry, really did damage. Had 300 people called before them. And was a very, very difficult time, but a time that a lot of people stood up to them. Actually, 2/3 of the people who were called did not testify. Real testament to people's, integrity in that area. The fifth book, which I'm writing now, is about the porn industry, attempted corporate takeover of the porn industry. Fifth book is about the art world, the Los Angeles art scene, and it has a trip to Vienna because they're trying to recover a stolen painting. Sixth book is about the environment, which I've talked about a little bit, and the last book in the series is about rock and roll. And well, really, it's about rhythm and blues and how rock and roll is stealing rhythm and blues in 1955. So that's the series.
Looking forward to them all. And thanks again, everyone. Keep an eye on www.marxedproject.org for all of our programming, study groups, future events, and so on. Next Saturday at this time, we will have a talk by an author about the aesthetics of Bertolt Brecht. So see you then.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks,
Okay.
Jeff.
Good night,
Thanks.
Dennis. Thank you for joining us.
Bye. Good night.